Hi, it's Avi with the Hag Reads. I'm here with a little bit of a different video today. Um, I am wrapping up. I am more than halfway through the second book in a duology. It's a YA duology. It's the This Dark Endeavor and Such Wicked Intent, which is a YA Frankenstein retelling. It's kind of his backstory before he became the adult Victor Frankenstein. So they're looking at, he's around 16, 17 years old, and he's got a twin brother, and that. And so I'm about halfway through the second book in the duology, and I want to do them both in the same video. And I think I'll finish it up today or early tomorrow. So I thought I'd do something a little different. I've talked before about I'm trying to get into that fall feeling because I'm ready for summer to be over here, and it's not. Hold on one second. So I pulled up the 10-day weather forecast. Yes, that's how obsessed we are in this house with what's going on with the weather. Ooh, this looks promising. It says it's only supposed to be 96 today. And it says it's 96 right now. So that's a below 100 degree day. Hey! It says tomorrow 92, and then it's got 100, 105, 104, 100, 97, 97, 100. But what's interesting there, and I know I'm boring you to death, and I'm so sorry, is that the nighttime temperatures for that same period is 81, 80, 78, 81, 82, 82, 79, 77. Now here's the exciting part, 74, 75. That may be, if that trend actually happens, if we stay in that range, low 80s, high to mid 70s, we may actually be able to open up the house in the evenings and only use the air in the hottest part of the day. And if it drops down into the mid to low 90s during the day and the low 70s at night, I can live with that, and I will open up the house and turn off the air. So maybe, fingers crossed. I know nobody else cares about this because you probably all live in regular places, unless you live like in Florida where it's horribly humid, or Texas, which those places have kind of had their own issues. But for any of you up north people, I was on a website not that long ago, and it had the weather posted in the corner, and it was 75 degrees, and the day that was posted, it was like 106 or 109 here, and I was like, you bitches. So I am super excited. If that trend continues, I know nobody else cares. I spent 3 minutes talking about the weather that you don't care about, but I'm trying to capture that fall feeling, and not just focus on how effing hot it is outside. So to that end, I've been having chai tea in the morning, hot chai tea, I might add. I love chai tea a lot. I have my green tea all the time, and hopefully in October I can switch over to warm for at least part of the time. But this tea has been such a lifesaver for me, and I really, really love it. But we've been doing other things, like I made a pot of chili, and so we've been having that. Chili is one of my favorite fall meals. We went to I went at my son's request to the library website and found as many of our favorite horror movies. And typically I wait till October to do this. But we both feel kind of desperate for fall, and horror movies, some of the classics are a go-to for us. So we checked out like Halloween 1 and 2 and Friday the 13th 1 and 2 and Sinister and Insidious and, a few others. And we don't watch them together because when he wants to watch them, I'm busy. And when I want to watch them, he's at work. So we haven't been, last year we watched a bunch together, but we haven't been doing that. And also we can't watch, like normally we would watch late at night. After he got home from work, we might sit and watch one in the dark. And just, give ourselves the jump scares that we know are coming, but still manage to get us. But our neighbor, when he's home, we just can't. because apparently, making any noise. But I understand it's late at night. It would be after 10 o'clock at night, and the movie's an hour and a half long, and that's if we don't pause it. So, going into after midnight, and the walls are kind of thin. This is a cinder block wall here, and I think it's maybe 2 or 3 cinder blocks deep, but there's no insulation. And I can hear him when he's in the other room talking on the phone, and I'm sure he can hear me doing this and wonders what the hell I'm doing talking to myself. But because he could hear my son in the other room when he was gaming and talking to himself and stuff. And when he makes Skype phone calls, and he asked me one time, what is he doing in there? Does he talk to himself? I'm like, yes and no. So it's just how it is. But he complains like we're deliberately doing it to annoy him, and that's not the case. We're just living our lives. It's just this, the amount of noise that transmits is due to the fact that, there's no insulation in between this cinder block wall and his apartment. So when you're sitting near the wall, of course you can hear what the person is saying, or at least that they are talking. When he sits in his couch is directly on the other side of this wall, when he sits there and talks on the phone, I can hear that he's talking, and depending on how animated he is how much of that conversation I can pick up. But I can, at the very least, hear him talking, the vocalization going up, going down, going up, going down, and then the pause is where he's listening. And if I didn't know better, maybe I think he was over there talking to himself too, like a lunatic. But to me, it just sounds like a phone conversation. And I don't want to know any more about his life. So my reaction to that is to turn on my oscillating fan. And then I can't hear it quite so well. And the more, I don't hear him very much during the day. And the fan makes it nil, unless he's being really, really loud. But then you add in, the air is on, and I hear his air come on way more often than ours. So, I haven't found a way to gently suggest that he get some kind of, an oscillating fan or turn on a radio on low, because it would be much less annoying. And I understand, his desire for quiet, because I like to be, I like quiet too. But I'm much less judgmental after the last few neighbors we had who had small children, and it sounded like they were living in our apartment with us, with the crying and the screaming and the parents yelling and all of that. So it's a matter of perspective, I guess. I get the sense that he's always lived in single dwelling, like a house or something that isn't really attached to other people, or that he lived only with adults who rarely make noise. So I don't know what to think about that. You can get to be, he's got to be close to my age, but he may be in his mid-30s to early 40s. So how did you get to be that age and never lived in a noisy apartment? I feel like we have to walk around on eggs, but I want to live my life too. We just try to be careful at night, because I don't work, so nobody's keeping me awake. But maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago, I would have been livid about something like that, and that's entirely possible. You start to think people are doing things deliberately. And I'm really, after I dated my angry alcoholic, I have a much different perspective on what people are deliberately doing, because most of the time people are just trying to live their lives. And lives are noisy and messy. So, but, so we checked out these movies, and so I've been slowly watching. I started with Friday the 13th, the original, and the sequel. And our library doesn't have anything beyond that. They have the third one, and I did request it. We'll see how long it takes to come in. Just because I don't remember the third one at all. And I realized in watching the second one that the first movie, The Mothers, and if I'm spoiling this for you, I don't know if you've been living under a rock or what, but in the first movie, the mom's the killer. In the second movie, it's Jason, but he's wearing a bag over his head. The hockey mask, is it the third movie that it comes in, or is it is it longer? Is it the fourth movie? So I'm requesting the third movie to see if that's when the hockey mask comes in, because it's such an iconic thing. You see the hockey mask and you think of Friday the 13th and Jason. But really, in the first two movies, the hockey mask is not there. So that I think that's interesting. And one thing I have been doing with Friday the 13th and Halloween 1 and 2 is when it's available on the disc that we get from the library, I've been watching the commentary, which I have never done in the past, watch the commentary or the extras on any of these movies, because I just enjoy the movies for what they are. And so I haven't made any effort to learn any of the history of it. So I did find it really interesting for Friday the 13th 1 and 2, and for Halloween 1 and 2. I think there was only one of those that didn't have any commentary, but I watched all the little extras where they're available on the discs. And I didn't know that Halloween actually came out before Friday the 13th, and that the writer and or the director went to see Halloween to basically plot out Friday the 13th. Like, he said in the commentary that it was totally, like, they wrote this based on Halloween to make money because that was popular at the time. And I thought that was really interesting. I mean, I know they came out around the same time, but to hear them go, yeah, we totally ripped off Halloween, I thought that was kind of amusing and interesting. So I enjoyed going back through them. I find it interesting that for those two, and you don't really find this anymore, that the first Friday the 13th and the second one, the storyline picks up right where the other one left off. In fact, in Halloween, where that happens, because it's the same thing, the first one ends, the second one picks up right there. They actually replay the ending of the movie with her telling the kids, you know, go to so-and-so's house and call the cops, and going through all of that again with the Donald Pleasance character shooting Jason. So they're one right after the other. They're almost one movie in two different parts. But you don't really see that in sequels anymore. One rarely picks up directly after the events. There's always some time, a year, a season, 10, you know, whatever it is, there's usually a larger gap in time than it just picks up right after the events. So you don't really see that anymore. And then the third one I watched was Sinister, 1 and 2. And I loved the first Sinister. And it's been long enough since I saw it that I had forgotten a lot of the little details. And again, I never watched the commentary. And Sinister 1 had two commentaries. One that was just the directorial stuff, and then they did a second commentary video on there where you could go through the whole thing, and they talked about the writing and the collaboration. And so I watched both of those, and it was really interesting, the process they went through with the story and the way they shot it and everything. And they talked about the subtleties of the storyline and the creepiness of the 8mm film and all of that. And then I watched the second one, and I had a vague sense that I didn't like the second one, but I didn't know why. And so I got about halfway through, and my son came home from work, and I was like, I don't like this movie. And he's like, well, what are you watching? And I'm like, Sinister II. And he said, I thought you liked that one. I said, no, I told you when I was picking the next movie that I didn't think I liked Sinister II. But we had it, so I watched it. And I thought about what I didn't like about it. And it was that all of the subtlety that was in the first movie, the way they hinted at how the story was going to wind up, and some of the things I learned in commentary that I still hadn't picked up and didn't know. I feel like everything that was... Oh my gosh. I have to sit a different way. We have a window straight over there that's in the kitchen. And in the afternoon, the sun comes through, even though there's a blind outside and there's two curtains there to kind of, you could see maybe the pattern on my face there's even a tree out there. So there's a tree, and outside, bamboo blind, and inside, curtain, and then a sheer over that. And it's still comes in and blinds. Like, it moves along the wall. You could probably see it back there, and then it finally got here. But it's blinding my one eyeball. Everything that I loved about the first movie, all the subtleties of it, all of the hints, they took all of that in the second movie and just put it like in your face. It had more jump scares. It took all of the things that it hinted at in the first movie with regards to the ghost children and the way the movies were filmed and everything, and laid it out for you as if there hadn't been a first movie, or that they were afraid that nobody, like, that we were too stupid to understand the subtleties of the first movie, and that they had to, like, blare it in your face with all of the little details that were the subtleties and that were the things you were like, is that what's going on here? You know, and all of the little spooky, creepy elements, they just put them, like, out in your face. I also didn't like how interactive the ghost children were in the second one. And maybe that was all going on in the first movie and you just didn't see it. It was kind of hinted in the first movie with that scene where the girl is laying in the bed and the father checks on her. And then, you see the picture of the tree with the people hanging and the ghost girl sitting in the corner going, shh. That there was some interaction between the girl and the ghost children. But the second movie takes that away and makes the ghost children a very active part of this recruitment process. And I thought it just treated the viewer, the audience, as if we were too stupid to understand it if you didn't lay it all out for us in such a clear and unambiguous way. I feel like it insulted the intelligence of the watcher, and so I was really pulled out of it. And I really like the Deputy So-and-so character, even in the second movie. But the way that they treated those creepy, mysterious elements made it so much less enjoyable for me. And I think a second movie could have been done equally as well, and it just wasn't. I haven't looked at reviews to see how other people felt about this, but I will probably never watch Sinister II again, unless it's been long enough and I forget and think, did I like that movie or not? But next year I probably won't get the second one. I'll just watch the first one, because I really do find, even though you know the ending, I still kind of get creeped out by the movie if I watch it at night in a darkened room. Like, it still gives me a little bit of the shiveries. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And then, we've had some fall foods, and we've been wishing for fall in our hearts. And from the weather forecast, we may get there. Next up, I have, let's see if I can do this. Ooh, what did I do with it? Insidious. I'm going to watch Insidious 1 and 2 next. And I think maybe there was a third one. I didn't check. I should probably check. But I'm going to watch Insidious 1 and 2. So maybe I'll talk about that in another video. Halloween is my all-time favorite slasher movie. The first Friday the 13th, definitely. I struggle with the transition from Freddy's mother was the killer, and obviously they couldn't bring her back because they killed her at the end of the movie. I'm sorry if I've ruined your life by spoiling the plot line of Friday the 13th, Part 1, that has been out for more than 20 years. But by bringing Jason in, at the end of the movie when he jumps up and they have that seat jumper scene, he's a young boy. And then the next movie follows right after that, and you see an adult Jason as a killer. That's a disconnect for me. If they had him jump up out of the lake looking more like a teenager or an adult, then I might be better able to accept the transition from the mom as the killer to Jason as the killer. And the little bit they did with the girl that was doing the child psychology stuff, yeah, that kind of introduces the idea of what happened. And they used the term mongoloid in the second movie, I think. And I was floored, because this would have been 1980. Were we still using the term mongoloid? Because that's like somebody with Down syndrome, but that's such a not politically correct term for it. And I had forgotten that was in there, so that was another thing. I was like, what? But yeah, I struggle with Jason as the killer, even though it's an iconic horror, classic genre thing. Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees and Freddy kind of follows in that vein of horror movie killers, slasher killers who don't die. They live forever. There's nothing you can do to them. And, both Michael and Jason can walk faster than you could ever run. Even if you got in your car, he's still going to catch up with you. And then Sinister, I think, is kind of a level above that in terms of sophistication. You get a kind of different, it's still, but this is more like deliberately supernatural. With Halloween, Michael Myers was just a kid in the suburbs who, for all intents and purposes, was either a psychopath or a sociopath. He was just a killer. And what was scary about that was that it was a middle-class suburban neighborhood. You're talking about a 6-year-old boy who stabbed his teenage sister to death, and then comes back 10 years later and tries it again. And I think that's what was scary about it was, and that maybe what was why I didn't quite enjoy the remake that they did of that, because it white trashed it all up and tried to give a reason for why Michael Myers was the way he was, because he was abused. It was a white trash family. His mom was a stripper. Like I think it lost some of its punch in terms of somebody being at 6 willing to kill another human being, because in the original, this would have been a kid who had a very easy life. We're talking about a middle-class family living in a nice house. You look at the furniture, and yes, it's dated and very 70s, but you're talking about just a middle-class, normal family. And the remake tried to make it into something different. And sure, that could have been an abusive household, and we didn't know it in the for that original storyline. But really, I think what they were trying to make was that it was terrifying because he was relentless and soulless, and just to achieve his end of killing his siblings, was willing to do anything, escape from a mental asylum, kill anyone that got in his way, kill people to get a vehicle, and stealing to get the mask, and all of this. But it was still started as a 6-year-old boy. Whereas Friday the 13th, the mom went crazy because she blamed the counselors for her son's death. And so she had been trying to sabotage this, this summer camp from the time, from the 1950s when the original incident happened, all the way up until, whenever the present storyline is supposed to be taking place. She'd spent the better part of her life trying to stop anyone from ever opening that camp again, unable to accept that it was an unfortunate incident, but just because it happened doesn't mean you have to kill every teenager that ever thought about sex. And then you enter the kind of supernatural with that. In 1 and 2, for Halloween, you only kind of get the supernatural element. They tried to introduce it with the whole Sam Hain thing, and then he didn't die when he was shot, and the doctor, or the Donald Pleasance character's like, but I shot him in the heart and he got back up. So they're starting to introduce a supernatural element there in terms of he seems to be invincible. And that becomes the same thing with Friday the 13th, because she machetes him right in the shoulder and embeds it really well. And he gets up and he's still a killer. And after, the end of the jump scare and everything, she's alive and he's dead, or he's gone. So supernatural element there. But the original stories don't start out as supernatural in any way, whereas Sinister starts out as a supernatural kind of story. And now that I've rambled on, and these are some of my favorite horror movies. Sinister II, not so much, but definitely those. And thanks if you've watched it, if you have opinions other than mine, similar to mine, you want to recommend horror movies, I've probably seen most of what's out there unless it's very new. Because I'm a voracious horror movie consumer, but perfectly willing to talk about it if you want to talk about any of these, or give me recommendations, suggestions, tell me what your favorite horror movies are and how they affected you growing up. I used to watch these as Sunday movies. Yeah, I'm old enough that they had horror movies on Sunday mornings, or no, Sunday afternoons. You could watch them late at night on Saturday, or in the afternoon on Sunday after cartoons and after, was it Soul Train? No, that was Saturday. I don't know, maybe all the God stuff was on Sunday. But I remember you could watch horror movies, and one of the ones that really affected me the most, and we lived in Maryland at the time, so I would have been 9, 10, or 11, because we were living off base, and that was the first time my parents had ever bought a house. My dad was in the Air Force, and I grew up on military bases, but there was a 6-year period where we lived in Maryland, and for, I think, 4 of those 6 years, we lived in a house off base. Those were the unhappiest years of my life. I was incredibly shy, and these kids in this neighborhood had all grown up together for years and years and years, and I was never socially accepted, and that was unfortunate. So for me, those were my unhappiest years in terms of dealing with other children and going to school, but the house experience itself was fine. But I remember sitting there watching these on Sunday morning with the curtains still closed, and the first movie that really, really got me was one called Let's Scare Jessica to Death. And there was some kind of jump scare in there. And I think I was eating a bowl of cereal, or I don't know I literally jumped up off the couch and screamed. And thank God nobody else was home. I have no idea where my parents were, but I was the only one there screaming it got me. And so I was 9, 10, or 11. And that kind of, I think, cemented my love of horror movies that has followed me throughout my life. But I remember they were like those bad 50s giant ants and that sort of thing. And ones like Let's Scare Jessica to Death. And so they were atmospheric. A lot of them were black and white. But that was the start of my love of them. But you can't get that anymore. You never, gonna watch network TV and have the afternoon be 2 or 3 bad horror movies in a row. I loved that. Now you know a little bit about me, and kind of some of the things I like and why I like them and my thoughts on. And I'm certainly no expert on movies. Like I said, I've never watched the commentary until just this week. So this has been a fun process for me, and a way to just get in touch with fall while it's still too hot. Thank you if you've watched all the way to the end. I will be back tomorrow. Have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you. Bye.